Okay.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So just go ahead and look at the camera and go ahead and introduce yourself for me, your name, age, occupation, and where are you located?
My name is Amy Beaudoin. I'm 36 years old. I live in Girdwood, Alaska, and I work as a professional mountain guide.
Awesome. So give me a little bit about, like, where were you born and raised, and were you an outdoorsy kind of girl, and how did you get into this line of business?
I was born in Fairbanks, Alaska. When I was about 14 years old, I moved to Girdwood. I love snowboarding, and from there, it just grew into mountain guiding as my professional career.
And how do you learn about, like, how to mountain guide the trails and stuff? Do you have to kind of be an avid hiker and an outdoorsy person already, or is that something you can train for?
Well, you definitely have to love being in the mountains and being outdoors, and just that personal experience that makes it happen. And then from there, you also have a lot of professional training that you have to do to gain the skills and the confidence to be able to go out and take other people out.
Awesome. Give me kind of like the lowdown and like describe your adventurous life out there. Like kind of what things would I see you doing, on any given day as far as, your adventures in Alaska?
Between like what I do for work and then what I do for fun, an average day for me is to wake up early and pack my backpack and be out the door, out on the trail, usually by 8 or 9 every morning, either doing wilderness hikes, ice climbing trips, rock climbing, glacier travel. I love backcountry skiing in my own spare time. That's my big passion right now. So it's just, I stay really busy and active.
Awesome. And what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Alaska? Kind of what does Alaska mean to you?
Alaska is untouched wilderness as far as the eye can see.
Awesome. And kind of, give me a little bit of the dangers of Alaska. The things that could definitely hurt somebody if they're novice or they're not prepared and they head out of the wilderness.
It's really good to have a general understanding of what you're getting yourself into before you go out up here. I love it when I go out with people that are new to it. They're like, wow, I could just like walk out the front door and here's a bear and it's blowing 50 miles an hour and raining really hard. I mean, you definitely need to know how to dress for the weather at the most basic level. But then, too, you really need to be able to, like, understand what terrain you're going into and what risks are involved.
And kind of what would be your best advice for any extreme adventurers who would maybe want to, like, head out on a crazy expedition in the wild? What would you tell them, this is what you have to do, this is what you have to look out for?
When people get some wild ideas and they come to me and they ask me, like, hey, what do I need to do to be prepared for this? And I say, you got to start out small and progress through the steps to make it a successful trip. Because there's no point in just throwing yourself into something, being in way over your head, and not being able to enjoy the experience.
And if you found yourself stranded or lost out there somewhere, what would be your first steps to what should you do if you end up lost, and what should you not do?
Well, the first thing you should do if you realize you're in a situation is to stop for a moment and take a deep breath and just assess your situation. Like, realize what you have going for you and what is definitely going to be hampering you in your situation. And then just kind of take a mental inventory of the situation so that you can make the best decisions possible and not just act out of impulse.
Should I stay still, or should I wait for somebody to rescue me, or should I oh no, that's not going to happen, I better start moving?
Well, it just depends on what you have going on. If you're injured to the point of where you might not be able to hike yourself out, where you're just going to get yourself in a worse situation, perhaps you should call for a rescue. But if you're capable of handling the situation, then you should take it onto yourself to be responsible and get yourself out of the situation you're in.
Awesome. Kind of give me a rundown list of all the special skills that you have that would make you a good team member for a large-scale expedition. You could just be like, I can hunt, I can fish, I can bear muscle, I can read those plants and animals. Kind of give me a list of all the stuff that you're qualified at.
Well, I'd say probably one of my best benefits is that I have a good attitude about things, and I like to have a good time. I like to have fun. But 2, I have good hard skills as well. I can hang out in the woods for a pretty long amount of time and live comfortably out there. I can identify plants, build shelters. I can fish. I can climb technical mountains. I can, walk around in the woods really contently. I can swim, tie a bunch of knots. I can navigate using GPS, compass, just looking around at what we have going on. Travel on glaciers. Do pretty well at altitude. I could understand rivers and navigate rivers. I don't know. I have fun outside for sure.
How do you think that it sounds like, to get to doing all this stuff and potentially put yourself in dangerous situations, you have to kind of have a lot of mental strength and stuff. How do you think you add up against the average person in regards to fortitude, mental strength, especially regarding like physical, challenging, difficult situations?
I think I do pretty well with stuff like that. For whatever reason, I'm able to wake up and feel good every morning, even though I'm carrying a huge pack and sleeping in a wet sleeping bag. I'm still able to make a joke and brew up for the day. And, I can keep it going for months and months and years on end, basically. I'm a pretty patient person. And
what situation are you living in out there? Are you living in a kind of like just regular housing? Are you in a tent a lot of the time? Or what's going on?
Oh, yeah, I'm a softie, actually. These days, I'm living in a condo at the base of a ski hill, which is pretty nice when you spend a lot of days outside. I've definitely lived in small cabins and tents, things like that, in the past years, but I've been really enjoying the last year in the condo, I have to admit.
What's the most, I guess, that you've looked at, or the most rugged kind of, maybe lengthy, situation you've been in where you've had to kind of just, I guess, almost live like a survivalist type of a thing?
Wow, I did a glacier trip a bunch of years ago that kind of stands out in my mind, and we were out there, and we didn't have any radio communication, and we were in the central Chugach range. We were doing a kite skiing trip, and during the trip, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, we had relentless winds. We could barely build snow walls, but the bit of a snow wall that we had actually totally blew over in a massive windstorm, and it exploded the tent, and it was dark, it was blowing, and I was actually seriously concerned at that point in time because we were doing everything right, and there was no escape. There was only 3 of us, and we were at about 8,000 feet at the time, which is kind of a high altitude for the Chugach range, and we literally took the rest of the snow wall. We couldn't chop into the snow at all on the glacier, and we buried the front of the tent with what was remaining of the snow wall and just sat up all night against the wall of the tent and just hoped that the rest of it didn't just completely explode in the wind. And then it took about 2 days with dental floss to sew the tent back together from the inside of the tent. So that was kind of an interesting experience. We weren't able to cook or anything like that for probably about 4 days.
Oh my gosh, that sounds horrible.
Yeah.
What would your friends tell me are your best and worst characteristics?
My best characteristics is probably that I really like to have a good time, and I wake up smiling every day, and I just know how to have a lot of fun, and that I work hard. My worst characteristics, that I can be really stubborn maybe sometimes about stuff, as my son nods his head like, oh gosh, he can be really stubborn sometimes. But, it's, I guess, maybe being outside and having to live like this, it makes you kind of strong-headed sometimes, and I don't know.
How do you rank in your team? Like, what role do you end up kind of playing? Team leader, or kind of like the peacemaker? Where do you kind of land?
There are so many different dynamics when you bring a group of people together. I kind of like to take a quiet role in the beginning and kind of assess the group, unless I'm obviously guiding, where I have to show a little bit of leadership, but I really feel like a group's going to work better when everyone feels like they can voice their opinions about things, and I've seen that works best as a group. So even when I'm in a leadership role, I find that it's really important to make sure that everyone feels like they're a contributing factor to the team. But I've definitely had to take times where I have to be the peacekeeper and the mediator in a situation.
If I was saying to you, hey, Amy, I'm heading on an expedition, see you later, what would you tell me are like the three basic kind of tools and supplies that I should absolutely not forget to take with me?
Things you absolutely can't forget is in Alaska. Would that be where we would be going?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I'd say definitely don't forget your rain gear. Don't forget a water bottle. And make sure you got some kind of outside communication.
Sounds good to me. Give me kind of, what would be like your biggest fear, if any, going into kind of a really large-scale cross-state expedition?
My biggest fear of a group, like something I don't know what I'm going into.
Yeah. Maybe you'd be nervous about, or any weaknesses you'd be afraid would, hold you up.
By myself.
No, with a group.
With a group? I'd like to know a little bit about my group that I'm going into the woods with. That'd probably be my biggest thing that I'd really want to know is what do we got going for us? Are we, what are things that are going to make us a strong team? What are things that we might need to work through to make us a stronger team? I'd say that would be probably my biggest thing that I want to know about ahead of time.
What, in your opinion, would make a good team member, and what skills would maybe not make a great team member?
A great team member obviously has a super positive attitude, really upbeat, even on those rainiest, hardest days. That they're willing to work together to make good stuff happen. That everyone's willing to contribute in a situation that makes a really strong team. Things that totally break down a team is when people are on their own agendas and they're kind of out for themselves, and that doesn't work very good at all.
How vital is working together, everybody, in a stressful, intense situation?
It's absolutely crucial. It's definitely what makes it happen for people. You can be in the hardest situation and everyone's just positive and upbeat and oh yeah, we're totally out of food. We're not going to get a flight out. We're totally stranded. And you can hang out if everyone's willing to be hey, I got a Snickers bar, let's divide it 14 ways. Then, hey, you got something. But if one person's hoarding the last candy bar, then it's just going to make a lot of animosity. It's going to make it weird, for sure.
Do you consider yourself a survivalist? Could you be a survivalist if you had to be? It sounds like you've done it already, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Oh yeah, I definitely feel like I could definitely survive situations, for sure, pretty well.
And you were saying that you were born and raised in Alaska, so how familiar are you with the territory, kind of what adventures have you done growing up and up until you were a mountain guide?
Before I was a mountain guide, I became a mountain guide when I was about 22 years old. Before that, I hiked around all over Alaska. My dad was an avid hunter. My mom loved to be in the backcountry. I got into snowboarding, backcountry snowboarding, when I was about 14 years old. And I would, in the beginning, boy, I would just hike up mountains, really actually with not too much idea of how much I was getting myself into. And I guess kind of the school of hard knocks, I figured out what you should do and what you shouldn't be doing. And got to know a lot of random places in Alaska. And then by the time I was in college age, I took a handful of classes that really dialed me into the safe ways to travel. Took avalanche courses and rescue courses so that I could feel confident in going out and being able to assess my partner's skills and ability and being able to step it up a couple notches so that I could take on bigger challenges.
Awesome. Do you think that anybody would, underestimate you as a team member for any reason?
Sometimes I've noticed that when I've been around people that have a lot to say, right off the bat, and they really want to make a big impression on me, I will take a quieter role because I feel like maybe they need to have that center of attention so they can feel confident in themselves. And so, it has been when I take a quad roll, like, maybe people don't know that, like, I have a firm grip on what I got